Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a video about the Samsung Galaxy Fold on the right and the Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus, and of course, TabS6 right beneath it. Now, I've already shared a comparison of the Note 10 and the Fold, very similar hardware, and the TabS6 is in between them for a reason. Even more similar hardware here, okay? And that's because the TabS6 has the same processor, nearly the same amount of RAM. I have the 8 gig version here, and this was the Samsung trade-in deal that I opted into. I'm going to take the Fold out of the way for a second, but remember, it is pure hotness. It really is. I mean, it's an amazing handset that I wish had come out earlier. That's it. That's my story on this. Had this come out earlier, it would absolutely be my phone. But that's not the way things went. They had a delay in April, and instead, these two products, these two fine products at that, are here at a much lower cost to me personally. The Note 10 Plus, I traded in my Note 9 and 500 plus tax and change or whatever it was. And then I had a $200 discount that I waited for the TabS6 to be available to use. And Samsung finally shipped it to me. I have been using a TabS6 because I didn't know when this thing would arrive. I'm going to unbox it today, and let's hope that it didn't come damaged because Samsung shipped it like crap. They get no credit in that regard. It literally came in a box with zero padding, and it was physically open. I took pictures, don't worry. Let's hope it's not broken, because leave it to UPS, and I'm not knocking UPS specifically, or FedEx, not knocking any of them specifically, and this device could be cooked, right? I mean, that's just the way of the world. So let's see. And this is the 256 gig TabS6, which has 8 gigs of RAM as opposed to the base model, which this outprices by a bit, $730 as opposed to $650, which not everybody needs, that's for sure. This is in the space gray, my color of preference. And let's just make sure this thing didn't get whacked in shipment. All right, so the screen looks okay, a little dusty, but that's not a big deal at all. And now this brings me back to the purpose of this video, which is that for a little over 1,000 US, I've got my Note 10 Plus. Bring Ruslan's face back up. He is the cutest. One of the cutest. For me, the cutest. For you, I don't know. And then I've got the TabS6.
Let's get started.
Not right now,
Let me
baby.
help you get set up more easily by
Excuse the
guiding you
baby.
through the steps.
You know, don't misinterpret that in any way. I respect everyone. But the Note 10 Plus, the internals are nearly identical. 12 gigs of RAM, 8 gigs of RAM, same CPU, same GPU, internal storage, 256 gigs across the board. Storage expansion is a go here. You've got it with the micro SD card slot. No headphone jack. Both have Type-C ports. Over 7,000 milliamp hours. And here we have 4,000 milliamp hours. Cameras, very similar. We have S Pens. We have quick charging. The S Pen, I feel like, has taken a step backwards, but it's still an S Pen. Something that, with the Fold, you are foregoing for the foldable screen, which I think is a worthwhile trade-off without hesitation. But that's a matter of personal preference, right? So, my whole concept on this was that if the Fold was out in April, it's my daily driver. I don't care what else Samsung introduces. I don't need another generation of Note. I don't need another generation of Tab, because this is 2-in-1. This is my phone and my tablet. However, Samsung made a deal here, didn't they? They made it so that for a little over $1,000, I got my tablet and I got my phone with literally the same hardware as the Fold. And that's part of the problem. The Fold doesn't differentiate on a hardware level. If it did, this wouldn't be so easy for me to dismiss, meaning the Fold. But with this being a little over 1,000 and this being nearly 2, oh, it's easy to make a choice. As much as I love the folding tech here, the innovation, which I'm all about it. If you followed my channel, if you saw my first trip to CES back in 2012, you know how much I care about innovation. Without it, all is lost when it comes to tech. In fact, all is lost, period. Look around you. But it has its limits. There are limitations. And in this case, I wouldn't be interested in these two devices if the hardware wasn't identical outside of the folding display. But it is. And sometimes two is better than one, especially if it costs a lot less. Now, for the retail customer, this doesn't cost a lot less. In fact, these are close to the same price because $730, over $1,100 US, you're now in the same arena for buying these two as you are for just this one phone. But I will still make the argument that at full retail, you're better off picking up these two devices than the Fold. And that's because you have two. That's really my best argument. If the timing was different, if this had launched when it was supposed to, then I wouldn't be making this argument. I'd be telling you that the Fold is not a better, it is a better, purchase than buying two separate devices, because that's exactly what the Fold sets out to accomplish, is that you've got two in one. You have your traditional smartphone, and then you have your tablet. That's the beauty of the Fold. No compromise. One device to rule them all. And boy, do I hope they hit the 8-inch mark with the internal display on the revamp. But that's not what we have today, right? We have these that are in front of us. And with that in mind, that's where, for me, the comparison narrows tremendously. And I literally told my family, because they were wondering what I was going to do. They knew this phone was coming. They heard me blab enough about it, right? That unless the Fold brought something new to the table on the relaunch, and Samsung cut that return window for the Note 10 Plus right on the announcement of this phone being released in the US. Boy, they were tricky. And I was going through a hurricane evacuation. Screw you, Samsung. Seriously. I got enough things to worry about. All jokes aside, though, that was the truth of the matter. When they announced it on September, I think, 5th or 6th, whatever, I was coming back to my home. And this thing was out of return period. And I had already ordered the TabS6. And I skipped the Tab S4 because, quite frankly, it was crap. It wasn't a real innovative product. Granted, the pen took a step backwards, but the tablet is finally on par with hardware as all of their top-of-the-line flagship products. That's a big deal. Even though I love the S Pen, and I'm not a lefty, at least when it comes to writing, you're not going to sell me on a tablet with a generation old hardware. However, one that has current hardware, take my money. Unless I've already spent it over here, right? So that's what it boils down to, is that Samsung didn't give me options. And since I'm not a bank, at least yet, I can't print money. This is where things are at. So again, at full retail, I'll reiterate that because the hardware is identical and the true difference is the Fold and its form factor, two is better than one. However, this has no IP rating either. Everybody likes to talk about, oh, the Fold is so fragile. No, it's not so fragile. You just got to be careful with what you do here and do not get it wet. And, eventually dust might get under this screen. And I can't tell you a good way to clean this screen, but that's the story. That is the whole story. That's what you have to be aware of. Competent is the word. Here, you have no IP rating. There's nothing to protect the Tab S6. Get a case. So that's why people who are complaining about this, I'm kind of like, wait a minute. It has Gorilla Glass, don't get me wrong. You're not going to scratch this with your fingernail where you could scratch the internal 7.3-inch display of the Fold. That's why we've got a pen. If the pen could scratch it, the Fold is, the Note and the Tab line is completely undone. I wish Samsung would bring back the Note line of tablets, but I'm just glad Samsung still makes an Android tablet because no one else does. That's why Windows is getting back in it with the Surface Pro X, folks. Is because who else is taking a shot at Apple? I don't know what's happening now. Things. But, yeah, that's the story.
Let's look at the terms and conditions.
Personally,
Once you read and agree to these, we can really get going.
I'm not getting going. Had this not been an option, this would have been my first option. And that's it. It's very simple. But Samsung's screw up led to, and not that they're upset, They got my money here, but they could have got a lot more money here. And, well, maybe not a lot more when you take into account that I traded in my Mint Note 9, but a wash on money, and I would have had the product that was delayed by numerous months, that has a tremendous amount of scrutiny, that people who don't care about technology are calling a gimmick, whereas their tried and true bread and butter is on my plate instead. And I'm precisely the type of consumer that they would expect to buy the Fold. So they definitely shot themselves on this one, in the foot or whatever. You pick the body part. So American. Shot themselves. They hurt themselves, because I would have absolutely purchased the Fold. But instead, I have this, and I'm not disappointed in any way as long as this didn't get damaged in transit by, it's actually FedEx, it's not UPS. I just get so many shipments. To track it in my mind is not so easy. But that's what's up. So internal hardware, literally the same, except this guy only has 8 gigs of RAM. This guy that I called baby. But otherwise, and 6 if you go with the entry level at $650, which is still expensive, but nowhere near what Microsoft is trying to get out of your pocket for the Surface Pro X, or Apple with their crappy iPad Pro. Yeah, it's got a bigger ecosystem. I'll get into that in the Tab review. But that's just because of sales numbers, which I'm not knocking. That's a legitimate thing. Absolutely legitimate. But when it comes to this choice, Samsung really put me in a position where I didn't have a choice anymore. And that is their fault. So Samsung, shout out to you for screwing up the Fold launch. Shout out to you for making the Fold not my daily driver. This is not a positive shout out in any way. It's a knock. You could have had it all. Not that you didn't get it all with me buying these two, but I think all of you understand. This is the reality of 2019 smartphones, tablet experiences, at least if you care about the quality of build, material, and innovation. If you don't, well, there's another company for you out there, I'm sure. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.